full agenda in a moment here, but what I want to do is just focus on a couple of things. We're going to be reviewing how to access and enter data into eRETA. We're going to take a deeper look at amending RWAs as well as using digital signatures. And of course, we have several subject matter experts with us today on the line, and they are going to answer your questions in the chat throughout the presentation. So we're going to be hosting these digest sessions the second Tuesday of each month for the foreseeable future. So you can always review videos of our past beginner and advanced sessions if you'd like to online at www.gsa.gov/eRETA. And you can also sign up to review this course again on a future session, www.gsa.gov/CES. In addition to the training videos, I want to make you aware that we have a host of other materials and resources online on the www.gsa.gov/eRETA page, and that includes all of the past videos, a user guide, and an archive of our monthly quick tips that we send out to all eRETA users. So before I turn the presentation on over to Steve, I do want to go over just a couple of housekeeping instructions. Once again, please be aware that we are recording this session and that we post archived client enrichment series seminars on our YouTube channel, the link to which you can find on the last page of your slide deck. And speaking of the slides, you should have received a copy of today's slides as a PDF either earlier today or yesterday from the client enrichment series. But if you didn't find that and you don't see that in your spam folder, let us know in the chat, and one of the members of the CES team will get them out to you right away. We've automatically muted your audio, and that is to help us control the sound quality of today's presentation. If you experience any audio issues during today's presentation, crackling on the line, echoing, volume going up and down, first check the audio level of your speakers, and then we often find it's best just to disconnect and quickly reconnect your audio. And for best practice, try listening using the listen only feature, which broadcasts the audio through your computer speakers. So if you have a question during the presentation, I mentioned that we do have several eRETA subject matter experts with us. Feel free to type it right into the chat pane on the right-hand side of your screen. Our subject matter experts will address questions as they come in and share answers with you. In some, we will pull out for Steve if they require a demonstration as well. All of the questions, the ones we get to, and if there are some that we don't get to, we will compile them and we will turn them into a formal FAQ document and make that available following the presentation. A portion of today's presentation is a demonstration of the eRETA application, and what you can do when that comes up to get a better look at the application itself, you want to click that four-headed arrow at the top right part of your screen. That maximizes the viewing area and allows you just a little better visual access to what Steve is going to be showing us today. If you have a question at any time, you can just hit that four-headed arrow again, and it will bring the chat pane back, and you can ask your question there. So before we get started and turn it on over formally to Steve, we do want to ask a couple of quick poll questions just to understand everyone's level of familiarity with eRETA and things like that. As I mentioned, this is a class that probably has some beginners, probably has some advanced folks, so we just want to get a lay of the land. So we're going to bring in poll question 1 right now. And we just simply want to know, what's your current level of experience with eRETA? If you don't have access yet, but you're here to learn more about it, I have read-only access and I haven't used it very much. I have read-only access and use it frequently. I have access, excuse me, I have access and enter work requests in the system. All right, and it looks like we have a nice group on either end here. We do have 23-ish% of folks saying that they don't have any access at all, but we also have 55%, a little more than half, saying that we do have access and enter work requests in the system. And then 8 and 6% respectively have read-only and use it, or don't use it and then read-only and use it frequently. So Steve, it looks like we have a good mix of beginners and advanced, and that is the whole point of this presentation. So I think everyone is here in the right place. We are going to swap that poll question out and bring our second poll question in. And so this one, I believe, is for our more experienced people in the audience today, and we want to know, how often do you handle reimbursable work authorization? So do you do it daily, a couple times a month? Do you do it a couple of times a year? Almost never or never. I see responses are coming in. We do about 11% who say that they handle RWAs in one way, shape, or form every day. Well, a large chunk, 29-30%, say a couple of times a month, and then an even greater chunk, 43%, saying a couple of times a year. We do have about 8 or 9% total who are never to almost never. But it does look like we have a significant portion of our group here who either handle RWAs frequently or at least kind of sporadically, whether it's a couple times a month or even a couple times a year. So thank you for responding. Let us get a better idea of who we are speaking with today. And with that, I am going to get that poll question off the screen and turn over the presentation to Steve. Steve, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Eric, for the great introduction, and welcome everybody to our February presentation. If you've joined us in the past, in any of the past months, we've been doing these since July of 2018, so almost or close to 2 years now. We had a format where we did 2 different sessions a month, a basic session and an advanced session. This is the first month where we will be doing a joint session where we've kind of consolidated those 2 different trainings into a singular training presentation. So based on the poll question, I did see that we had a mix of beginners, so to speak, and folks who have been using eRETA, or at least our data entry users, more frequently. And this training today covers a little bit of both. We will start out with the read-only stuff, so stuff as far as utilizing the system, researching, looking up stuff, running reports, et cetera, that any user can do. And then we will transition to more of the data entry focused stuff, such as entering new work requests and making amendments to existing RWAs and things of those nature. So on your screen right now, slide number 4, today's topic. So this is the high level, table of contents, if you will, of what we want to cover today. The eRETA website and access. So if you're one of those new folks who doesn't even have access yet, we'll cover the basics here in just a bit. And then we'll go into the workflow of eRETA, understanding how to use the searches, and then we'll go in depth with an example of creating a work request in our test environment. So while you do have slides in front of you, or you might have received the slides, I should say, yesterday or the day before in PDF format, for the large majority of today's presentation, I will actually be jumping out of the slide deck and jumping into our test environment to show you a real-life example. I think that's been more beneficial than just reading off some slides and looking at a static screenshot of the system. And then at the very end, we will have some open Q&A, but as history has shown from these presentations, my colleagues that are in the chat pane now, our eRETA experts, have often been able to answer all of your questions as you put them in the chat window. But if there are any other questions that do come up that we aren't able to answer, we will have some time at the very end to answer those additional questions. So moving on to slide number 5, the first, ground zero of this whole thing, where to start if you haven't even begun the process yet, and even if you have and you want to find some training resources, is our website, www.gsa.gov/eRETA. So make sure you bookmark that page because it's kind of the launch pad or launching point for pretty much everything else you'll need. So eRETA website has our main page, which has a link to the PBS external portal. This is where you would log into the external portal to find eRETA. Now, the external portal is not part of eRETA. Essentially, you're logging into this portal, which GSA manages globally, and inside that portal are multiple applications, eRETA being one of those applications. So oftentimes people say, oh, I can't log into eRETA. Technically, you can't log into the external portal if you're having issues, and we'll address how to troubleshoot that issue with our portal team if you do find yourself in that situation. Additionally, on our eRETA website, we have a host of training materials, and I'm going to show you that in just a little bit here. So even if you didn't remember every single detail of today's presentation, sure enough, there's a quick user guide or more detailed user guides on our website for you to reference at any point in time. And then, of course, our eRETA website has a whole section on how you access eRETA in the first place. So if you don't have a user ID and password yet, you will go to the eRETA website to start that application process, which consists of these 3 simple steps, as you see on the slide here. And most of our folks usually gain access to get their user ID and their password within 24 hours after beginning this process. So it's a relatively quick process for getting a user ID and password. So first, before I go on to the next slide, I'm actually going to take my first exit from the slide deck and go to our gsa.gov website. So let me type it in here. I'm already on the website, but I'll just show you gsa.gov/eRETA. That brings up this page. So this is the main page here, and as you can see here is the links or the hyperlinks to launch the external portal, which is where you would enter your user ID and password if you have one already, to then access eRETA. So there's not too much on here. There's basic information. If you want to read all this stuff about what eRETA is, it's on this website, but for the most part, the main feature of this landing page is the link here to the external portal. Now, if you're a brand new user or not even a user yet, but you need to get a user ID, moving over here to the subtab, how do I access eRETA? This will have your three-step application process. Now, I'm not going to go over all 3 steps in detail. They're pretty well outlined here. Effectively, you fill out step 1, which is your application. Step 2 is you send your completed application to your supervisor and ask him or her to then route it or forward it to the eRETA help desk, saying that they approve of you gaining access to the system. Once we get that, we put our help desk folks in motion to get you or start creating a user ID and password to the external portal for you, and that's where step 3 comes in, usually within 24 hours, sometimes less, in odd cases a little bit longer, but step 3 is you will receive a welcome to eRETA email from our help desk with final instructions on activating your eRETA account. So all that stuff is detailed here. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. We spent time writing these details out here on the website, so it should be pretty self-explanatory once you read through them. As for those who already have access and you want to look at some of the training materials, you'll click on this eRETA training materials website, or excuse me, subtab over here. And there's a lot of information on here. We don't want to overwhelm you, but we want to also cover all of our bases. So if you're brand new to submitting a work request and you're going to get your first demonstration here today as part of this training, but then you kind of forgot parts of it and you need to submit your own work request tomorrow or later this afternoon in the system, have no fear. These our promo guides or user guides here go step by step through the whole process. So if you want to submit a brand new work request, this user guide is your golden ticket because it will walk you through step by step with pictures and screenshots to help you understand what information you're entering in what fields. Alternatively, if you need to submit an amendment to an RWA that GSA already has accepted, this user guide does the same thing by helping walk you through step by step through the process of submitting an amendment to an already accepted RWA. And then lastly, similarly, for those of you that might be applying digital signatures or doing the digital signature process, this requesting and applying digital signatures user guide walks you through that workflow as well. I'm going to skip over some of this other resources here, but you can browse them at your own leisure if you'd want to. But I want to focus now on the monthly quick tips. So we've been sending these out since September of 2018, as you can see here, and we archived them on this website under the Training Resources tab. We will be sending out the February 2020 quick tip here in just a day or two. And effectively, by the mere fact that you have registered for today's training session, you will now be on our listserv to receive that quick tip. But if the February 2020 quick tip is the first one you've ever received in your inbox, you can come back to this website here and pull up any of these quick tips. And essentially the quick tip, as the name might suggest, is a very abbreviated user guide, if you will, usually 1 to 2 pages. Sometimes we sprawl onto a 3rd page about a specific topic of using eRETA, a frequently asked question that we get, and we put that into a quick tip. So you can go browse these at your leisure if something you're just trying to figure out, how do I upload a document? Oh, look at that. This June 2019 quick tip says, or looks to be about how do I upload documents in eRETA. So we want to really emphasize these quick tips because they hit home on a lot of the questions we get asked, and they're short and easy and simple, so you could quickly probably answer your own question in a matter of minutes by reviewing one of these quick tips. All right. So that is the eRETA website in a nutshell. So let me return back to our training presentation here, and let me make this or blow this back up to the full screen. So moving on to step 6, which is going to be the bulk of what we talk about in today's presentation as we do an example of submitting a work request in eRETA and sending it to GSA and all of that. This is just something you might want to keep to the side. Slide 6 is a high-level overview of the whole process between what is on your plate as a customer, that first column on the left-hand side, what GSA is doing between all these steps in that middle column, and then there's a joint action, the far right column, that red column, that kind of says these are some of the things that both of us do, both you and us. For example, if you look at that upper right red bubble there, it indicates that both the GSA project manager and the customer agency representatives will work together to develop requirements, which include scopes, cost estimates, project schedules, etc. But I won't, again, walk through all of this process with you. You'll kind of get a sense of it as we do our example, but this is always a helpful reference if you ever want to kind of remind yourself of the order of operations, what happens first and what happens second, and so on and so forth. All right, so let's talk about using eRETA and searching for RWAs you've either just initiated, which I guess is technically a work request, or pulling up RWAs that have already been accepted. One thing to note is that even though you might have just started eRETA, let's say just today, and you just submitted an RWA tomorrow into the system, that is not the only RWA that's in the system for your agency. Every RWA that you've given to GSA in the past 15 plus years, even though you might have given it to us on paper or PDF format, is in eRETA. So you can access RWAs that you have previously given to us, even if you did not submit them electronically. Because if you didn't submit them electronically, we did it electronically for you after you gave us the paper or PDF. So all that historical RWAs, open, close, purge, whatever you have, but every RWA from the last 15, actually more than 15 years now, is accessible to you in eRETA, regardless of when you started to use the system yourself. So that's why these searches are so helpful if you want to find, historical or older RWAs. And every user, whether you're a data entry user or a read-only user, has access to the searches and they all work the same way regardless of your user role. So again, I'm going to jump out of the slide deck and go into our test environment to show you how some of these searches work. Let me log into our test environment here again. Where is it? There it is. All right, and I'm going to log in as if I was a external customer user of the eRETA application. So not a GSA person, but as if I was one of you. And again, this is our test environment, so the login looks totally different. This is not the new login process by any means. This is just how we log into our test environment. So now I've logged in to eRETA. There are multiple searches, so the basic search, as you might expect, is called search. But technically, this financial review, this documentation, and the estimates tabs at the top of the navigation bar are all searches as well. They just search for different data. So the financial review search, as you might expect, is more financially focused. So there's more financial related data on that particular search. Documentation that helps you search for documents tied to RWAs, such as estimates, customer letters, copies of the signed RWA, et cetera, et cetera. And the estimate search, as you might expect, is a way to search for estimates that we have for your RWAs. But I'll show you how all this stuff is actually tied together. You don't need to run 4 different searches to piece together the full picture of your RWA. Everything's tied together regardless of which of the 4 searches you start off with. So I'm going to start with a basic search here. And you see a whole host of search options. You do not need to fill out every single one of these fields to find your RWA or RWAs. We just give you a lot of options to find them in different ways. So first rule of thumb that we always highly encourage, don't write this down, don't forget this, is that if you're trying to find your RWA and every time you run a query it comes up with no results found, it probably means you have too many search criteria entered, and in that case, if you come up with that results of no results found, remove some of the search criteria, go to less and less, and that'll widen your net, and it'll most likely help you find the RWA or RWAs that you are looking for. So if you're ever looking for a specific RWA, that 7-digit number, you can type that 7-digit number right here in the work request /RWA number field, and that's it. Don't type in any other search criteria because There's only one RWA number. Every RWA number is unique. We don't reuse the same RWA for different customers. So if you know that number, type that 7-digit number in and click search. That's all you need to do to find that single RWA. If you want to run bigger searches or wider searches for maybe all of the RWAs for your bureau in a specific state, for example, you can do that. So the agency bureau code field here is pre-populated with the agency bureau codes that my user ID has access to. Now in this case, it's not a real-life example really, because not a single user will not have access to, say, 2 judiciary AB codes, Social Security Administration, and DHS bureau codes. We just gave this particular user ID in our test environment access to these 5 bureau codes. But for most of you who only have access to one agency bureau code, obviously you only have one checkbox here, so that's easy to select. But let's say you wanted to find all of your RWAs for, let's just say, Social Security Administration in this example. And let's say you wanted to find only open RWAs. So I want to go to this closure status pull-down menu, and I just want to find the RWAs that are still open and active. They haven't been finished yet, so I want to see what my ongoing activity is. And let's say I'm only concerned about RWAs that are not related to overtime utilities. So I'm going to select the option of no, overtime utilities equals no. And let me run that search here. And this is our test environment, so I do caution everyone that it does run a little bit slower than our live environment. But there we go. Now I have 634 results that met the criteria I've entered of Social Security RWAs that are currently open but that are not related to overtime utilities. That's just one of many examples, but you can add additional filters if you're like, oh, I didn't want 634 results. I was thinking I would get something closer to maybe 50 results, and maybe there's another search criteria you want to add. Maybe you want to say, well, I just care about my Social Security Administration RWAs in the state of Arizona, for example. So you could add that additional state or check multiple states if you wanted to. Some quick tips about the search feature, which works throughout the application. First and foremost, you see a lot of these labels look to be hyperlinks, and they are. They automatically open up the eRETA glossary. So for example, one of the terms that most people are confused about, or there's just so many possible definitions, is this work request / RWA status. What the heck does that mean? Well, if I click the pull-down menu, you can see I have, okay, work request statuses. There's pre-planning, unassigned, planning / estimated or canceled. Continue to scroll down. Well, now I have, oh my goodness, there's all these additional statuses for RWAs. What do all these things mean? Well, the easiest way to read the definition about those is to click on this work request / RWA status hyperlink, which will open up the glossary and jump you immediately to the work request / RWA status. And I'll blow that up a little bit.
Hey, Steve, can I just jump in real quick? Do you mind zooming in just a little bit on that screen if that's possible? And I'll also remind our folks in the chat that you can click the 4-headed arrow at the top right of your viewing pane, and that'll get you a bigger picture of what Steve is working with right now.
All right, and I was literally just zooming it in as you jumped in there, so hopefully I've made it bigger enough. But as Eric mentioned, the 4-headed arrow at the top right of your screen too also helps to expand your personal screen to a maximum view. So, now I just closed my whole thing. Sorry about that, folks. I got a little jumpy on the trigger finger there and double-click my mouse and close the whole window. So let me open this back up. And let me log out of the session and log back in. All right. Logging back in as a customer eRETA user. All right, so going back to the search here. So as I mentioned, these hyperlinks here will open up the glossary term. I mentioned specifically the work request / RWA status is often one we get a lot of questions about. What do these different statuses mean? Clicking on that hyperlink will open the glossary and give you a definition of each one of those statuses. And to continue to plug the gsa.gov /eRETA website, I will go to that one more time and just emphasize this. Navigating over to the eRETA Training Materials tab and scrolling down to that list of quick tips we talked about just a bit ago. but the November 2019 quick tip is on work request / RWA workflow and status labels, where we also repeat, essentially it's a repeat of the glossary, but we go into detail about all those status labels and what they mean. So you have multiple places to educate yourself on what these different statuses mean. Other quick tips on the estimate search is the magnifying glass. So you see the magnifying glass icon here next to a few of the search fields. And what they do, whether they're on the search or whether they're in the eRETA data entry screens, which we'll get to in a bit, is they allow you to search for a field based on other information. So for example, I clicked on the magnifying glass here next to building number. It brought up this pop-up window for me. And I'll make this even a little bit bigger just so it shows up. And so now if I did not know the building number, GSA's building number, I could search for the building number based on other criteria I did know. So for example, if I knew the building was in New York City, I could run a search on all the buildings in New York City, which comes back with 56 records. And then if I saw the address, I could further refine this by typing in part of the address. For example, maybe Broadway Street. Oops, nothing came back there. So let me rerun the search. But anyway, I can filter out the search by additional criteria, the state, the zip code, the building. Even if I just knew the street number, for example, 26, I could pull back addresses that had the number 26 somewhere in it. And you can see there's 4 results that populate here. So that's the way that these magnifying glass pop-ups work throughout the application. They allow you to search for a code or value based on other criteria you might be more familiar with. And when I click on one of the search results in those pop-ups, like I just did, you can see now that RETA populated the building number for me in the building number field, which is what I had, which was the field I was searching on just a little bit ago. Also, let me just do this real quick. I'm going to rerun the search I had a little while ago just to repeat that. Something else to be aware of, or just another little quick tip here, nothing fancy, but this little logo here by the user ID field, the faceless man, I like to call it. If you click on that, it'll auto-populate your current eRETA user ID, which in this test environment is this crazy looking email address, but if you clicked on it, it would have your email address, your user ID, and that would allow you to locate all RWAs where you were the one that submitted the RWA work request initially. Now, if you're not a data entry user, for example, but you're trying to find all the RWAs that your colleague entered into eRETA, you could type his or her email address in here too. You don't have to type your own, and this is open to any user ID in the application if you're trying to find RWAs tied to a specific person, or that a specific person has entered into eRETA. Other common searches, the agency contact email. So, for example, if you are the PM in your agency for a given set of RWAs, you could type in your email address here to locate all the RWAs that your name is tied to. Similarly, all the RWAs that a specific GSA project manager, all the RWAs he or she is tied to. So, lots and lots and lots of different ways to search for your RWAs. Now, I ran that search. Here I have 8 records on the new search criteria, which included that New York City building number I randomly selected a little while ago. So you can see some information on the screen here. I could click on any one of these to open it. If I wanted to click the export to Excel, I could do that. I'm not going to do that at the moment. But if I did click this export to Excel, which is a very nice feature, these 8 records would populate in Excel, but you'd have a lot more information in Excel. Obviously, we're limited with these 10 or 11 columns on the screen because we only have so much real estate on the screen. But in Excel, we effectively have unlimited real estate. So when you export any of these searches to Excel, you get a lot more columns worth of data that go farther on to the right. So there's always way more data in Excel than we will show on the screen. We just show some of the most commonly requested information on the screen. Now I'm just going to pick on one of these right now just to quickly show you some other features, and then we'll get into doing a mock work request submission, and let the fun begin. So as I click on this specific RWA in question here, I get some basic information on this RWA summary screen. I'm going to shrink this just a tad here, folks, just so I can see a little bit more, but not too small where it's hard for you to see. But I have some basic information about the RWA here on this RWA summary screen. If I wanted to, I can easily dig into each of the data entry tabs, which shows a lot of that information or more detailed information than what was on the summary screen about what was entered into eRETA for this RWA. You can click on any of these tabs, whether they're customer-centric tabs or GSA-centric tabs. You can see anything and everything. It's all transparent to you. And the nice thing about this, I mentioned earlier, I showed you the search, the financial review search, documentation, and estimates. And let's say you wanted to find, more of the financial information about this specific RWA, or you wanted to see the estimate about this or tied to this RWA. You would not have to go and take this RWA number here and, run the financial review search for that RWA and then run the estimate search tied to this RWA. Instead, on every screen, once you've jumped into a very specific RWA in eRETA, at the bottom of every screen, you will see this list of what we call these yellow hyperlinks. So this allows you to jump or navigate to other aspects of this very specific RWA without having to run a separate search for it. So if I wanted to go to the financial review screen of this RWA, I just click on the yellow hyperlink labeled financial review, and that takes me to the financial review screen for this specific project. If this loads, again, our test environment usually a little slower than our live environment. But again, all these yellow hyperlinks allow you to jump to other aspects of the RWA documentation. Oh, there we go. So here's the financial summary tab of this specific RWA. Again, a summary on the top half of the screen. Scrolling down, we break down the financial activity on this RWA based in a few different breakdowns. So we have the authorized and details roll-up. This is similar to what you might see on your billing statements. We have a function code / object class breakdown based on the type of work we've done on the RWA. And then we have a vendor summary based on the type of spending we've done with specific vendors. So some of this might be interesting to you. Some of this might be, I don't care. I don't deal with that stuff. That's fine. I just wanted to make you aware of that. Navigating quickly to the documentation screen, I want to show you that really quickly too. And this is where you can find a lot of anything that's been uploaded into RETA / eRETA for this particular RWA. So you might find copies of estimates here, copies of the signed RWA, the full scope of work, project schedules, customer letters, the acceptance letter, the completion letter, the closeout letter, all that stuff would be accessible here. So you can see the documentation screen also has, again, a summary of the RWA at the top half of the screen. But scrolling down is where you have access to a whole host of different documents tied to this RWA. So anything you might want to find is most likely here. And then you simply click on the document link you want, and it'll open up the document in its native format, PDF, Excel, Word, etc. And lastly, if I wanted to click on or find the estimate tied to this RWA, I would not need to go up to this estimate search. I could just click on the estimate here. ETN is short for estimate tracking number. And this is the specific estimate tracking number tied to my RWA in question. Again, you can see the summary level information here, and I can navigate, like the RWA, I can navigate using these tabs on the left-hand side to open up the details about this cost estimate. Okay. So that is, we spent some time just going through the basics of running the searches, how to open RWAs, how to navigate around the other things tied to a specific RWA. Again, for those of you that are financially or more financially oriented as part of your responsibilities with your agency, the financial review search is a good one to go to. You can see the search windows here. Looks very similar to the search we did earlier. It's a lot of the same fields. These work almost identically to each other. Some of them just have different search criteria than others, but the search works the same way. And if I were to run a search on the financial review screen like I am here and export that to Excel, this has a whole host of data. I'm just going to pull up an example here for you really quickly. And this is what one of the financial review export to Excel looks like when you dump it to Excel. And you can see I'm going to gradually scroll to the right, and you can start to see a lot of information here. A lot of the financial information, obligations, expenses, billed and collected, more about the agency who's funding the RWA, their funding sources here. Sorry, I'm trying not to scroll too fast, but I just want to show you that there is a wealth wealth of information here when you export this to Excel. So something, if this is your area of expertise, highly encourage you to check out the financial review, search, and then export those results to Excel. All right, so before I now navigate or start demonstrating how you would enter a brand new work request, do we have, I'll take a moment here to see if there are any questions, Eric, that the team of eRETA experts haven't been able to answer that I could answer aloud.
And I think you know your team well enough to know there's pretty much they can answer. They've been doing a great job in the chat. So we don't have anything to pull out and demonstrate at this time. We'll encourage everyone to keep throwing those questions into the chat, and our eRETA experts will get on them as best we can. So with that, Steve, we'll take a breath, take a beat, and we'll move on to the next part of our presentation.
All right, wonderful. All right, so now we're going to transition to the data entry aspect. So the things you could do as a data entry user, which the first basic functionality and feature you need to know is, of course, submitting a work request to GSA. So that is accomplished by going to this data entry tab and the main navigation bar and, clicking Create Work Request. And this is our test environment, just making sure my GSA computer is making sure the site I'm going to is safe. I trust our developers since we're paying them, so hopefully they have a safe website, and here we are. So this is the screenshot you see here is a work request template. To initiate a brand new work request from GSA, you just have to fill out this one single page, hitting all of the required fields as denoted by the red asterisks, and send it to GSA, and now you've kicked off the process. If you referred back to that kind of flow chart on slide 6, this is essentially the first step. Now, a work request, just to remind all of you, is meant to initiate the conversation with GSA. You submit a work request, it gets routed to the appropriate GSA region, and that starts the discussion with GSA, assigning you a project manager to go through requirements development, cost estimates, things like that, to see if this is something you actually want to do. A work request, submitting a work request by no means is obligating you to fund an RWA. You do not need funding in place to initiate a work request. It's just the beginning stages of a conversation. If you submitted 10 work requests to GSA, but you only had funding to do 7 of them, that's totally fine. You end up pushing the 7 through all the way to acceptance. The other 3 would stay here, and maybe you could fund them in a future year, or you might just end up canceling them altogether because you won't be able to fund them this year or in any future year. So again, our work request does not in any way, shape, or form obligate you to fund this right away. So the first required field of submitting a work request is the agency bureau. Who are you? For most of you, this pull-down menu will just populate the AB codes tied to your user ID. Many of you just have one, so your pull-down menu will equal 1 result, so that should be pretty easy selection. But if you do have multiple ones, you just make sure you select the right one because it's going to default to the first one in the list. So sticking with my Social Security theme, I will select that one as the who in this case. The next is the where. Where is this work to be done? Now you can select the state and then the city and then type in the address, but we highly encourage you instead to enter the building number if you happen to know GSA's building number. This is especially true if you are submitting work requests to GSA in facilities in the New York City, New Jersey metro area or the Washington, D.C. metro area, because those 2 areas kind of have an overlap of GSA regions that manage facilities in those locations. So if you don't enter a building number, instead enter a city and state, sometimes the system isn't sure which of the 2 regions to route it to, so it routes it to our kind of catch-all mailbox, which is fine. We built it that way, but that just may slow down processing time as our team works to make sure we get it in front of the correct region to manage it. And as I showed before, the building number, the magnifying glass icon works the same here in the work request as it did on the search. I'm going to search for buildings in New York. And more specifically, I'm going to enter that 26 again, which comes up with my 4 search results. I'm going to take the Jacob Javits Center as my work location. And now you can see when I enter the building number, it did already pre-populate the city, state, address, zip code, et cetera, for me. I don't have to type that in all manually now. So that's another benefit of typing in the building number or looking for the building number if you're not sure what it is. I'm going to gloss over these other optional fields, but I mean, they're pretty self-explanatory here. Room number, specific location, facility. So if you have a room number, you can enter that. Next required field is overtime utilities. Is this work request tied to overtime utilities or not? I'm going to say no. Next, estimated fiscal year needed. When do you likely need GSA to start working on this? Most of your work requests are, you need them essentially relatively soon, so the current fiscal year. But if you're wanting to enter work requests into the system kind of for future out-year planning purposes, you're more than welcome to select some of these future fiscal years. A few of our customer agencies have indicated that, hey, we want to start utilizing eRETA to kind of put in our proposed projects and needs for fiscal year 2022 and beyond, and that's why we have this new pull-down menu here. But if you're not at that stage yet of wanting to put in your future year needs, then by all means, you don't have to. It's just there as an option for you. So I'm going to select current, as I need this relatively soon, or I would like this to start relatively soon. Next, required field, estimated amount. This is just a rough ballpark of how big or small, kind of a small, medium, or large, or extra large project that you're requesting. So this just helps GSA, the region that's going to receive this, route it to the appropriate project manager. If you're looking at a an above prospectus project, for example, over $3 million, the project manager that that the GSA region might assign you would be different than if you were sending us a relatively small 2,000 to 25,000 sized RWA project. So that's the only reason why we ask you for this rough estimated amount. We will provide for you a true, more specific cost estimate as part of our project requirements efforts, but for now we want you to kind of ballpark, small, medium, large, or extra large as the project size. Next is the agency point of contact. Who is the primary point of contact that the GSA project manager should reach out to once we start to get the ball rolling? This pull-down menu will have a list of pre-populated email addresses based on the agency bureau code selected and the building number selected. So that's why these are SSA email addresses that have been tied to RWAs in the past between that combination of SSA's AB code and this building in New York City. So I'm going to pick Stephanie here, just randomly pick a name. If the name or email address you were looking for was not in that list, what you would do is go to the Add New option in the list, and then click on the magnifying glass icon, which will now pop up a agency contact information. So you would type in the email address, which is the key field of the new person to add. So for example, I'll just type in my name just to give you an example, even though I'm not SSA. But if I were to do that and I click the add button, RETA would say, oh, hey, we have a copy of that email address on file, and it would pre-populate all the other information here. But if you were truly a brand new individual to the agency or never had been tied to an RWA before, you would type in your email address, and then you'd have to type in your first name, your phone number, your address, etc. But just this one time. Every other time from then on out, your name or email address would be in the pull-down menu, so you would not have to enter all this information a second or third time. It would only be the first time ever, and thereafter we would have a copy of your information saved in the system. So let me go back to selecting Stephanie's name here. And then the last required field here is the description requirements. What is it that you need or are you requesting GSA to do for you? So you can add as much detail there as you want. The more the better we prefer, and go on. So that's all the required fields. I realize it took us about 5 or 6 minutes to go through this just because I was explaining each of the different fields, but obviously when you're going through this, after you've done 1 or 2 of these, the third, fourth, and thereafter will take you probably 30 to 60 seconds at most. Just to point out some other fields here that might be of interest but aren't required. The first one is the estimate tracking number. If you already have an estimate from GSA, and now this is usually going to be overtime utility estimates because we typically give you your next year's overtime utility estimate in the May, June, July timeframe, and then you give us the RWA in October. If you already have that estimate tracking number from us, when you're submitting this work request to us on day 1, make sure you copy paste that estimate tracking number in here. That'll automatically link that estimate to this work request, so we know that these aren't two different requests that are in fact one and the same. If you can't find the email in your inbox with the estimate tracking number, you also have a magnifying glass icon here to run a search to look for your overtime utility estimates or other estimates. If you do not have an estimate tracking number, and this would be typical of projects, not anything that's not an overtime utility, you would just leave this blank because you are submitting this work request to get an estimate from GSA. So that's kind of your intent here. So that would be blank. And the other field I'd like to point out here is this GSA Project Manager field. Now, if you've been working with a GSA Project Manager on this specific project, so this renovation of Conference Room 24B, if you've spoke to John Doe or Jane Doe, about like, hey, we were going to be submitting this work request to you pretty soon, and you've had some limited or maybe some detailed conversations with John Doe or Jane Doe about it, you can select his or her name in this pull-down menu. If you are requesting to say, hey, I worked with Jane Doe or John Doe on the project last year, and he or she was great, I'm going to put his or her name down again, even though he has no idea what this project is yet, that is not the intent of this pull-down menu. So if you happen to select Jane Doe's name in that example, and then it came to us and we said, well, Jane Doe she just maxed out. She's already managing 15 other projects. She can't possibly handle a 16th one yet. GSA will override the name you provided and assign you a project manager who can handle the new request that you sent in. So just be aware that even though you might select a name here, that in no way, shape, or form guarantees that that will be the project manager assigned. So now to send this to GSA, to get GSA to take action, there's actually a two-step process. First, I want to save my work here, otherwise everything will be wiped out if I left for lunch right now and didn't save it. So I'm going to save my work request, and that's going to do two things. It's going to generate a unique tracking number for me. And here's just the confirmation. This confirmation is telling you the same thing I'm about to tell you, which is this has not yet been sent to GSA, so GSA will not be taking any action on this yet until you take the next step, which is to submit this work request to GSA. So I'll say, okay, I acknowledge that. But before I hit the submit button, I just want to point out two things. First, you now have a unique tracking number tied to this work request. It has a W as the prefix, W equals work request. But this tracking number will be stuck to this project throughout its life cycle. So even after we accept this RWA, and let's say the W changes to an N type or F type or R type, for example, the 7-digit number after that will always remain the same. So this tracking number is given to you on day one and will always be tied to your work request /RWA. The other thing to note is now the system has identified that the GSA region that this will be routed to is GSA region 2, and that's based on the building number entered. So now, if I just wanted to keep this, I mentioned those agencies that wanted to do some, use the system to put future year requests in there. They could just stop right here and navigate away. The pre-planning status simply means that it's been entered and saved into our system, but we have not, or the customer has not sent it to GSA to take additional action yet. But if I do want GSA to take action, and in this case I do because I said, hey, I need this relatively soon in the current fiscal year, I will now hit this submit request button. And this pops up another acknowledgement to say, just be aware that just because you're submitting this work request does not in any way mean that GSA will accept your RWA. We're way too early in the stages of reviewing this, so do not obligate any funds yet. If you were to obligate funds at this point in time, you might be in violation of the Recording Act. Obviously, we had our legal counsel tell us what we had to write here, so that is why this information is in here. So you check the box that you've read this full message from start to finish and acknowledge that, and now you want to submit it to GSA. Additionally, if you do need to upload documents, we have some guidance there. Click OK, and we'll tell you how to do that on the next screen. So I've now clicked OK, and now I am, or now the system is essentially sending this work request to GSA Region 2 and notifying them via email that they have a work request to review, and we will then, or GSA Region 2 will then assign you a GSA project manager. Okay, so there we go. All right. So now we got the confirmation that this has been successfully sent to GSA Region 2. And again, if you did need to upload documents tied to this new work request, it's instructing you to click OK and then click on the yellow documentation hyperlink at the bottom of the screen. So if you did have, maybe you've already done some preliminary cost estimates or you had some preliminary scope of work or requirements development drawn up, you might want to associate those documents with this work request. And as you can see, if you scroll down and click on the documentation link, this will then navigate you to the documentation page where you can upload documents. And all of that is pretty self-explanatory. It's pretty much the same thing as attaching a document to email, so I'm not going to spend time going over that, but that is how you would do that. So even though you've sent this to GSA and they've gotten an email instantaneously, you're like, well, wait a minute, the documentation, I didn't attach the document yet. How would they know about the documents? That's okay. They're not going to get the documents in the email anyway. When they navigate into the system to assign a project manager, they will see the documents you have uploaded, and they will review or can review the documents directly in eRETA. They would not need it attached to the email. So that's why you would effectively be attaching documentation, if you need to, a few seconds or a few minutes after you've sent the work request to the GSA region. So at this point in time, the GSA region is working on the work request. They're going to assign you a project manager, so that's why at the moment the status here is unassigned, meaning we have not yet assigned you a project manager. But once we do, that status changes again. And once we do assign a project manager in the system, you will get a notification email that so-and-so, John Doe, again, is your GSA project manager. Here's his email address. Here's his phone number. And that communication notifying you of the project manager will go to the person who submitted this work request in the system. Again, this funky name in our test environment, but this would be your name if you're a data entry user. And also would be sent to Stephanie, in this example, as the point of contact we identified when we were entering the work request. So those two individuals would be the first two notified of the assigned GSA project manager. So now what happens, and if you're, again, referring to slide 6, if you have it open on another screen by chance, this is where that red bubble in the upper right-hand corner happens of that slide 6 that we talked about before, which is the requirements development sessions will happen, whether they be in person or over the phone, whether they take 4 minutes or 4 hours or 4 days or 4 weeks, depending on the complexity of the project, right? But all that stuff happens offline, as it always has before. None of that stuff will happen within eRETA, but effectively that'll happen offline. So now let's assume, let me clear out my search here. So now let's find, let's fast forward and let's say that this work request has been assigned. We've done all the requirements development sessions with the GSA project manager, and now we're ready to go. We're absolutely certain we want to fund this particular project, and we need to get it to the finish line, so now we can start executing the work. So I'm just going to, at random here, pick another RWA that's in this. Let me find the fiscal year 2021. Here we go. So now what would happen after that, all the requirements and such happened, we would want to return to that RWA or that work request in eRETA and effectively enter all of the rest of our information. So this is similar to what you used to fill out on page 1 of the RWA 2957 form, but instead of filling out that paper/PDF, you would be filling out that same data but in eRETA. So I opened up my RWA, and let me show you what I did there because I kind of did it fast. I want to make sure you all saw that. If I'm a data entry user, when I open up that RWA from the search, it'll take me to this screen here, and I'll have this edit pencil icon here. That means I can edit it. So I want to click on that, and that'll open up the RWA into edit mode. Now, some people say, well, wait, this says it's read-only view, and we'll probably have to reword this, but this simply means if you click on this, it'll return you back to read-only mode. But doesn't mean you're in read-only mode. So I know some folks have found that a little bit confusing, so we'll work to address that in a future release. But the first tab in edit mode is the customer information tab. It's the work request tab. It's everything we've already entered. So you could come in here and make changes now, but most likely this is all still accurate, so you would probably leave it alone and move on to the billing information tab, which I can do by clicking on the tab here, or alternatively, at the bottom of each screen is a save and proceed button. Both options get you to the same location. Now I'm on the billing information tab. This is where I would select information about how I want to be billed or how I need to be billed. So am I an interfund customer, non-IPAC or IPAC? I would select the appropriate type. If you're not sure of what that is, two ways to do that. First, you can click on the billing type, and that'll open the eRETA glossary for what billing types mean. I'm not going to go through read that, but that's one option. Another option, what we just added in the very recent release back in October of 2019, is these tab instructions. You'll see this hyperlink on every single tab, and if I click on that, a new window will pop up, and that'll give you more details. Effectively, these are the same things as the instructions you might have been familiar with the old 2957 form on pages 4 and 5. We've just converted those instructions into electronic format so you can see more details on what these fields mean. So you can see here that, that was the first term, but the billing type, IPAC or non-IPAC or interfund, that'll explain what those different things mean to you. So the tab instructions, if you're ever confused or uncertain about what exactly should I be entering in this specific field, these tab instructions will pop up this pop-up window and will have the information about each of the fields on the screen you're currently looking at. So I can enter my agency location code now too, if I know what that 8-character code is, or not 8-character, but 8-digit code is, which I always refer to as my checking account at the Department of Treasury, my checking account number at the Department of Treasury. I would enter that there. If I knew my BOAC, I could also do that. So a shortcut is if you know your BOAC, you can enter that 6 alphanumeric character into this position here, or you can use the magnifying glass icon to look up your BOAC. Billing Office Address Code is what BOAC stands for. Based on other criteria, or a brand new feature that we've added is this new My Favorites feature. So this My Favorites, which is a star icon, allows you to save your favorite BOACs tied to your user ID. So every time you come back into eRETA to enter, say, a new work request or a new RWA, you don't have to use the magnifying glass icon to look up your BOAC again and again and again, or have to memorize what that 6-digit character code is. The My Favorites feature allows you to save BOACs tied to this particular RWA, or BOACs that you want to use for any RWA, not just this one that we're doing now. Now, if you click on it for the very first time, you'll get a message like this. You haven't saved any of your My Favorites yet, but to get started, click on this link. This opens up the search, and it ran a search for me already for all BOACs across our systems that are tied to my Social Security, my SSA agency bureau code. Now you can see there's 64 records. Maybe that's way too many for me to sift through. You know, maybe my billing entity is only in, let's say, Boston. So I want to find out all of those, and in this case, there's just one. So to add this to your My Favorite, all you have to do is click on the star icon under the Favorites column, and that'll shade the star yellow now. And for the sake of it, let's run another search. Let's just add randomly, just for the sake of this, I'm going to add this Kansas City, or excuse me, the Chicago BOAC as well as another one of my favorites. Let me close that. And now every time I come into eRETA, you'll see those 2 BOACs are now saved to my favorites. And I can add more. I can remove them by clicking on the X if I need to. You can save 1. You can save 1,000,000. It's all up to you how many BOACs you might need to use based on how many different entities you're entering RWAs for. But if I click on the BOAC in question, or the BOAC that's most appropriate for this particular RWA, I just click on it, and you can see now that that BOAC populates here. And the reason why I kind of jumped down to BOAC as opposed to filling out the agency location code first is because every BOAC has one ALC tied to it, and therefore by selecting the BOAC, it also auto-populated the ALC for me. But you can enter these in any order you want. If you happen to select a BOAC that is not, let's say you entered an ALC in first that was different, it would wipe out the BOAC, and then if I went back to my favorites here and selected that BOAC again, it would update, you see it refresh the ALC to match the one tied to this. So it won't let you mismatch a BOAC and an ALC, for example. And for those of you that aren't familiar with BOAC, again, stands for Billing Office Address Code. A BOAC is really just shorthand in GSA system to represent the full-on billing address. the agency location code, and the agency bureau code. So one BOAC is tied to all three of those, and it's unique to that combination. So this is a way that you don't have to type in the full billing address. Entering the BOAC pre-populates the billing address for you. If GSA has already linked the estimate to my work request, then this number will populate with that dollar amount here. If they haven't, but I know my estimate, I saw the estimate they provided to me over email, I could type that number in here now. So let's say it's $25,000 and $125. And the rest of this stuff, again, is optional, but a lot of you use this, specifically the funding agency code, the FPDS codes, which sometimes are confused with BOACs, but BOACs are internal to GSA, again, to represent the billing address, whereas an FPDS code is unique to the FPDS acquisition system that represents the funding source for acquisition purposes. So they are, while they do look similar sometimes, they are different codes. GSA owns these codes, BOACs. The FPDS community owns these codes. Moving along now to the accounting details tab. Now I want to add the funding sources for this, so I'm going to at least add one line first and foremost. So I'll click the Add button. And this is where I can enter the funding year, funding type, my treasury symbol that'll fund this particular RWA. So I'm going to pick, say, the funding sources of 2020 funding source. Let's say I'm going to fund $25,000 of the amount by this one accounting line. This is an annual fund type, and then I'm going to enter my treasury symbol. Now, here's another pause. Pay attention in case you're multitasking. Now I just want to draw a lot of attention to the treasury symbol field because we get a lot of questions about this. So oftentimes folks will enter in a treasury symbol. They'll just start typing in here, and when they go to save this screen, they get an error message that says this treasury symbol doesn't exist. And a few minutes down the road, we get an email on our side saying, hey, can you load this treasury symbol? It's not an eRETA. Well, the fact of the matter is it actually is an eRETA. You just might be typing it into a format that's not yet or that is not recognized by RETA, that's not recognized by our billing system, and it's not recognized by Treasury. And so we need it in the exact format that those three systems utilize. So that's where, again, the magnifying glass search icon comes into place. Or we also have a similar My Favorites feature for the Treasury symbol field as well. And you can see in this case, I have a few My Favorites saved in here in the test environment. But let's say I want to add some different ones. And when you open this My Favorites feature, which is the same thing, if you notice, whether I clicked on the My Favorites star or the magnifying glass search window, they both open the same exact search field. It's the same thing. On the lookup for the treasury symbol, we have very detailed instructions about the format. We have an example of annual, multi-year, or no-year funding for the treasury symbol lookup. And so, for example, if I wanted to find a 2020 treasury symbol for, let's say, SSA, and I typed in some partial information there, and as you can see, the search results come back. Now, many of you are more familiar with this column here, this 2-digit year treasury symbol, and that's fine. That is a former format, but RETA itself is now expecting this component treasury symbol format. But the search, we allow you to search for either one of the two formats. We will just always populate the parent screen with this component format. So, for example, if I wanted to say this is my favorite for future use too, I'll highlight that one now. But I also want to select it and just want to populate that parent screen, so I'm going to select it. And now you can see this full component format is saved here on the treasury symbol line. And that's the format that RETA is expecting. And then the last piece here is the agency accounting data. And this is a free text field. You can copy or you can enter whatever you want into this field. Now, this will also get printed on your billing statements that we issue as we bill you. So you want to enter helpful information here, because when your account payable folks on your side of the house are receiving those bills, they need to reconcile it as far as what bucket to pay the bill out of. Whatever information you enter here for them will help them make that connection a little more smoothly. Okay, so you can enter stuff in there. Now, a warning here is that if you do copy and paste information, let's say from an Excel file into this field, due to certain limitations further downstream with the billing system and with Treasury's IPAC system, we will automatically scrub that data for any what's called non-ASCII characters. So if there's like return carriages in there or other special characters that you can't visibly see, but they're kind of embedded in there, RETA strips them out. So if you have pretty formatting in your Excel file and you copy paste it in here and then it formats it really weird and funky looking, that's why we have to scrub the formatting to make sure it doesn't break something further downstream when billing happens. So I'm going to save this line here. And now I want to show you another feature here, which is the ability to add multiple accounting lines. So now let's say I want to add another accounting line. For the remaining $125, let's say this one, let's say this one is know your funding. I'm going to fund the other $125 out of a know your pot of money. And I need to enter my treasury symbol. I have a few saved here. Let me just say this is the correct treasury symbol, and I'll select that. And now this warning message is one you would potentially get too, is this is saying that because you've entered multiple funding sources where one is annual and one is something else, no year, that this has been red flagged for us to have an additional level review. This is more to cover both of our butts than anything else. Not that we want to, hold anything down, but this was some audit findings a few years ago for us that we now want to make sure we're double checking some of these RDVs that are funded out of different funding sources. If both of these were no year or both of these were annual funds, you would not get this message. But anyway, I just wanted to make you aware of that. You might see that. So, okay, I've entered 2 funding sources here. Great, that's awesome. I can fund my RDV with multiple funding sources. Yes and no. So the yes part is, as you can see on the screen, I've clearly added 2 funding lines. The no part is there are limitations downstream with our billing system, that our billing system can only bill one of these 2 lines at any given time. But that's why we stressed, or that's why you might have seen me here, enter this line 1 of 2, or line 2 of 2 and line 1 of 2. That's because this text here is printed on your billing statement. So even though only one of the 2 lines can ever be printed on a billing statement in any given month, the fact that someone paying the bill might see, oh, line 1 of 2 or line 2 of 2 should be a clue, an aha to them to say, okay, well, even though I only see this one line on the billing statement, the line 1 of 2 to me should suggest that there is a second line of funding, and I could go into eRETA and look that up to see where the other pot of money is if I'm not sure myself. And that draws my attention, or is making me draw your attention, I should say, to this multiple accounting lines help text. So clicking on that opens up a pop-up here which talks about what to do if you have multiple accounting lines, which is, this second bullet here is what I kind of just talked to. Make sure you preface anything in the agency accounting data field with line 2 of 2 or line 1 of 2 or line 1 of 5, depending on how many lines you're adding. The selecting line to bill, let me show you what that is. So that's this column here. So as I mentioned, our billing system can only display one line on any given bill. So if you want to instruct RETA to say, hey, well, I want the billing statement to show this line first, you'll want to make sure you select the radio button next to that line and click Save, and that'll ensure that when we send this transaction down to our billing system, this is the funding information that'll show up on the bill. And in any point in the future, let's say we billed you for a couple months now, we're getting close to maxing out or spending that $25,000, you can come in here at any given time, that's 3 months down the road, for example, do an administrative amendment and just simply check this other line and save it and send that down, and now any bill that's generated from this point forward will now reference this funding source on the second line. And you can come back in and out and change this every month if you wanted to. I don't know why you would want to, but you could. It's not stopping you from changing which line is referenced in any given billing statement. And we only bill once a month, around the 19th of each month, so as long as this change is in there before the 19th, the billing statement that generates on the 19th will reflect whichever one of these lines is highlighted right now. But again, there's more details. If you often use multiple accounting lines in eRETA, it's worth probably clicking on this hyperlink and just reading through this. There's not a lot in here, but just reading through this to make sure you're aware of all the downstream limitations you have, or we have, with which of the 2 lines or which of the multiple lines will display on the bill. All right, and then the last part of entering a work request is the digital signature process. So the only thing here is that you'd want to identify who will be signing this RWA on behalf of my agency. Again, the list has a pre-populated list of names associated with other RWAs for Social Security in this building before. Again, if that name, if the signer's name is not displayed here, you can click Add New. Alternatively, if there was a name on here that, let's say, Brian Jones no longer works with SSA, you could select his name first in the pull-down menu, and then select the magnifying glass icon and click Archive. And what that does is it effectively removes Brian's name from showing in the pull-down menu moving forward. So now, well, I realize it still shows there temporarily. Well, I guess the screen is still, or the reader is still thinking. There we go. Now Brian's name is no longer in the pull-down menu. So again, if you ever have people who don't work there or they don't do that responsibility anymore, you can archive his or her name by doing what I just did. Alternatively, sometimes we have an email address that's just typed in wrong, so you want to archive the misspelled version of the email address. That would be another way, or another reason why you use that archive feature. So I'm going to select Kelly's name as the person to sign this, and that's all I have to do. So if I'm ready to send this to GSA, if I've entered all my information, I can click Save or Send to GSA. Either one does the same thing. And then this will generate a notice to GSA to say, hey, the customer has entered 100% of their RV information in eRETA. Now you, as GSA, need to enter your half, which is in these 3 grayed out tabs. These are disabled to you as a customer because this is GSA-specific data that is entered here. But effectively, that is a notice, or clicking Send to GSA sends an email notification to GSA to begin doing our work. Now, one thing we needed to remind you of is that by clicking the Send to GSA button here, does not immediately have a digital signature email request sent to Kelly. Kelly will not get an email request to sign the RWA the moment you click this button. Instead, Kelly will get an email notification to sign the RWA only after GSA has gone and entered our 3 tabs here too. And then the last piece of the puzzle is after we've entered our information on these 3 tabs, we then route for signatures as the final piece. And it's at that time that Kelly will get the email notification to sign the RWA. So common misconception is that Kelly does not get an email notification to sign the RWA the moment you click Send to GSA. So just be aware of that or remember that. I will show what happens here. In this case, this work request is not yet tied, or at least the estimate has not been linked to this RWA by GSA. And in that case, you will get this notification that says the estimate is missing or the estimate attached is not yet approved, and that talks about that. So we do not let you effectively send your work request to GSA until the GSA project manager or the GSA estimator has linked the estimate to the RWA, and it's at that time that you can then click the Send to GSA button successfully. If you have the estimate tracking number already, and for whatever reason GSA has not linked it for you, remember you do have that capability back on the Customer Information tab to copy-paste the estimate tracking number in here. So you can link the RWA, or excuse me, link the work request to the estimate yourself if GSA is dragging their feet or forgot to do it for whatever reason. So it's accessible by both parties to make that connection. Okay. I know we're getting close to time here, so I want to make sure I cover a lot of the main features that we wanted to talk about today, and I think we've gotten through a good amount of them. I have a few slides to wrap up, and I can easily do that in 10 minutes. So, but before I do, I'll take a pause here and see if Eric and team have any questions I can answer aloud.
Thanks, Steve. No, we don't have anything to pull out. Like you say, we're down to under 15 minutes here in the session, so I want to give you the appropriate amount of time to finish up and get to our final polling question. So I'll turn it back over to you. I think we're heading into amendments or something, if I'm not mistaken here soon.
We're going to do amendments, but first a quick stop in digital signatures as we kind of talked about that. So right now I'm back in the slide deck, back to slide 21, because this is just easier to show digital signatures. Again, the request for signatures is not emailed to the signer's name, Kelly, in our example a little while ago. Kelly will not receive that email until after GSA has also entered our half of the information, and then we click the Route for Signatures button. Once that happens, Kelly would get an email that looks something like this. It'll have a subject line minus these tests in the head of it, but it'll have a subject line that says RWA, the RWA number, and then the city and state, and then a sequential number. And this is important over here on the right-hand side. Anyone that digitally signs RWAs should really add these 3 email addresses from DocuSign, and DocuSign is the software vendor we use for digital signatures, but you should add these 3 email addresses to their address book. That helps your email client and your agency see emails coming from those 3 email addresses and say, oh, okay, I recognize that. This seems like a safe email address because the owner has this email address saved in his or her address book. So that's one thing we would like to point out, these 3 email addresses here on the right-hand side. So the signer gets this email, they click on this yellow button, Review Document, and that effectively opens up a new tab in their web browser, and they see a copy of the 2957 form like you see here on slide 22, and they can follow the prompts to effectively find the location to sign. You'll see the little yellow sticky tab here that says sign in this example, and they would click on that and it would apply their digital signature. Now, if we haven't mentioned this yet today, a reminder that signers, anyone who digitally signs RWAs, does not need eRETA access. The digital signature process is completely independent of eRETA. It's handled through DocuSign, as I mentioned. So as long as the signer's name you indicate, like Kelly's name we indicated on the prior screen, is a valid email address, and he or she can get email sent to that government email address, they will receive these notifications to digitally sign. They do not need an eRETA user ID and password to sign the RWA. Speaking of amendments, again, we'll plug if you have amendments to already accepted RWA. So now we've accepted an RWA. Let's say we accepted it months ago, and now you need to make a change for whatever reason. That's when you would do an amendment. To give another plug, if you have an amendment to go through, we go through much more detail about this at gsa.gov/eRETA in the training resources part of the website, as we talked about a few times. And there is that step-by-step user guide with screenshots that go through all the amendments or how to process amendments. And there's 3, or I should say 4 different types of amendments, and those are listed down here. The e-input code, and don't pay attention to these letters. The letters are just a way to identify to the system which type of amendment you're processing. The e-input code is an administrative change that you might be submitting something very small, not material to the agreement that we've already previously signed. H-input code is if you have to make a change to the billing information. For example, that BOA code is wrong. Let's say the BOA code is wrong because we entered the RWA for you before eRETA existed a few years ago, and now you have the chance to correct everything that we messed up when we were doing the data entry for you. But you can initiate that billing change with an H-input code to update the BOA on an RWA. The N-input code is to submit a notice that you need to either cancel the RWA that's been accepted, or some priorities changed, and even though you have requested 12 months of overtime utility services, for example, you need to cut that early, and now you only need 6 months worth of that, so you want to submit a request to close this out earlier than we initially expected. And then the last type of amendment is the X-input code, which is the biggest one that you might need to add funds or decrease, changing the amount in some way, shape, or form, or you're changing the scope or some other things. Amendments can be initiated by you initially for the reasons we have explained, or GSA can sometimes initiate the amendment too. So amendments can be done on any single RWA. As we mentioned before, it does not only include RWAs you submitted through eRETA. There's RWAs dating back 15 plus years ago that we've input into the system that are in there for you to amend today as well, if they're still open and active. Of course, something that's completely closed out, you can't amend it anymore, but anything that's open and active can be amended. Slide 24, so this is a checkbox. So the different amendment types allow you to change different fields. So if you started an e-input code amendment, for example, and wanted to change the dollar amount, well, the dollar amount is not something that can be changed on an e-input code, so you won't see the checkbox here. And you might be wondering, where is this? Again, go to gsa.gov/eRETA and navigate to the eRETA Training Materials tab. And this crosswalk, this is just, oops, sorry about that. This is just a snapshot that it goes down farther, but we didn't want to make the screen image really, really, really tiny. But this document, this crosswalk is available tied to that whole amendments user guide I talked about a few seconds ago. So this is a helpful crosswalk for you to look at in reference to say, hey, okay, which fields can I change with whatever input code? So I know I took the right input code from the start when I start to initiate an amendment. And any field on that crosswalk that has this red asterisk by it would indicate if you change that field, that'll automatically trigger eRETA to identify that this amendment now will also require new digital signatures. And one other thing to note, this input code, this administrative change, these are amendments that you can initiate that can then be immediately sent into our financial management system. You do not need GSA's approval or review of that amendment to submit that. So that's why you'll see a lot fewer checkboxes, especially as you scroll farther down on this crosswalk. But if there's something seemingly, easy to change, and it doesn't materially affect the agreement terms and conditions, you can submit those immediately to our financial management system, and they'll show up right away. Any other change, the H input code or the X input code, even if you didn't change anything that was a big deal, like the dollar amount, those still get routed to the GSA region to first review your amendment before we can accept it. And then to close out amendments, this is the amendment summary tab. So after you initiate an amendment and start one, just before you send that amendment to GSA to then review, you'll get this amendment summary tab, which is the same amendment summary tab that GSA will have access to, which just kind of highlights the before column and the after column to point out what was changed. So anything that was changed will have a blue asterisk next to the field name, and the new data will be show up in blue text under the after column. So that is both you and ourselves will have access to this amendment summary, so we can kind of make sure we made all the changes or didn't make additional changes we didn't think we were going to make. So this is a way to kind of see all those changes before you hit the send to GSA button. So we're going to wrap it up here. Take quick note of slide 26 here. This is some of our websites for whether you have eRETA specific questions. This is the eRETA website. If you have more generic RWA questions, they're not system related, go to our parent website, gsa.gov/RWA. Same thing with questions. If you have very specific system questions, eRETA@gsa.gov is the place to go. If you have more general RWA questions, askRWA@gsa.gov is the place to go. And lastly, on the last bullet there, if you have a very specific question, I think somebody put this in the chat window at the top of today's presentation or before we even kicked off and said, hey, who do I talk to? I have a very specific question on a specific RWA. Well, that can be accomplished in one of two ways. First, in eRETA, if you pull up the RWA, it'll list or outline the GSA project manager name on the RWA. On the RWA summary screen will list his or her name and email and phone number. If you can't find that or you're struggling to find that or maybe you're not in eRETA yet, you can also start a little bit broader, which is slide 27, and these are our regional RWA managers. So if you can't find the GSA project manager's name, or maybe he or she's being unresponsive to your questions, you can reach out to the regional RWA manager, which is identified on this map here, and they can kind of guide you to the appropriate person or persons that can help and assist you with the question that you're asking about the specific project or service that you're calling in about. So with that said, I am going to stop talking. We have 4 minutes left. If there's one question or two that you have for me, Eric, I'll answer it. If not, I'm going to let you wrap up the closing ceremonies here and put on the final poll questions to close this session out.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. I appreciate the effort. This was our first go-round at the eRETA Digest, and we're going to hit our 90-minute mark right on the spot here. So thank you to you. We do have some questions, but not for you. We have some questions for our customers. So we are going to bring in a couple of knowledge check poll questions that we covered over the course of the presentation, but some of the more important things that we want to make sure that you take away, the knowledge that you take back to your day-to-day. First one here is, does my agency need to have dedicated funding set aside for a project or service before I can submit a work request in eRETA? Yes or no? All right, Steve, you did a great job because it looks like overwhelming majority of folks here, 90+%. The correct answer is no. A work request identifies only a potential customer need, and so you do not, it's not a contractual agreement. So you do not need to have dedicated funding set aside to put a work request in. That's one of the big fundamental changes of eRETA. And for those of you who are new to using the system, might take a little getting used to, but find it's way more efficient and effective. So we're going to get that question out. We have another knowledge check question coming in. This is about everybody's favorite topic here at GSA. This is about digital signatures. And so we want to know, do you need an eRETA user ID or password to use the digital signature functionality? Give a second or two for people. I think at this point, a couple people going against the grain, but we do have 95+% with the correct answer. No, you do not need an eRETA user ID or password to use the digital signature functionality. It exists as the DocuSign outside of eRETA. So if your person who signs off on your finances does not have an eRETA user ID, that is fine. They can still continue to sign RWA. So thank you. That is our second knowledge check question. And we have one more that we want to ask while I take a moment again to thank Steve and thank all of our customers for attending today. I think we had over 150 I saw at one point. And we just want to know, as a result of today's session, how much more comfortable are you using eRETA to submit RWA information to us here at GSA? About 2/3 almost say you are much more, and then another 25% say you are more. And I see a few people here who would still like some more training, so I'm going to point you to two places. One is to the resources slide that Steve has up with all of the information, and you should be getting a copy in your email if you don't already. You can go online to www.gsa.gov/eRETA, or if you want to come back next month and take this very training again, you can do so, www.gsa.gov/CES. But it is time to start winding down. One more time, I want to thank Steve Sacco. I want to thank all of the eRETA experts and the CES team. Most of all, I want to thank all of our customers for attending today. We're going to compile all of the questions asked and answered in the chat and any others that we didn't get to and post them as a formal FAQ document. We'll make that available to you. Again, that's online at www.gsa.gov/eRETA. And like I said, we are hosting these training sessions the second Tuesday of each month. So if you or a colleague would like to attend the next one, that's going to be Tuesday, March 10th. And you can register online at the CES website, www.gsa.gov/CES. Later this month, we have a non-eRETA Client Enrichment Series presentation on Thursday, February 20th. And the title is PBS Boosts Procurement Efficiency with the Least Offer Platform. So we want you to join us to see how the new streamlined workflow of our lease offer platform option can cut your lead times from your lease procurement and get you in the spaces you need more efficiently. So again, one more time, that website, you can go online, you can register at www.gsa.gov/CES. It is right now 2:30 Eastern, so I will sign off by just saying the goal of the Client Enrichment Series is to engage our audience on workplace topics that contribute to your mission success and to the effective management of your real estate portfolio and program. From me here in Washington, D.C. to all of you, thank you very much for attending, and we hope to see you at a future Client Enrichment Series presentation. Thank you.